Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Middle East Teaching and Learning Conference and this session on Odyssey. I'm Sarah Lambert. I'm a teacher at Dubai College, and I'm a specialist leader in education focusing on Heartness lessons and Odyssey. So today I wanted to talk to you about developing Odyssey in your classroom. So I thought I'd cover what Odyssey is in case anyone is new to the term Odyssey, although you'll very quickly realise that it's already going on in your classroom. Why Odyssey is important and a focus explicitly on it is important. How to develop it explicitly in your classroom. And then I thought I'd round off with a few examples of how I used Odyssey last term, both online and in blended learning. If you have any questions today, please do use the app and I will respond to you at the end of the session. Or if you think of something down the line, then my contact details will be in the slides as well. Okay, so what is Odyssey? I thought I'd just start with two summaries by two UK charities. So Voice 21 was established in 2015 based on the innovative work of School 21. They are currently supporting over 7,500 teachers in the UK and have a couple of hundred schools now working with them to develop Odyssey. So they say that oracy is the ability to articulate ideas, develop understanding, and engage with others through spoken language. In school, oracy is a powerful tool for learning. By teaching students to become more effective speakers and listeners, we empower them to better understand themselves, each other, and the world around them. And for me, that's the important bit, that empowerment, that they have the confidence to voice their own views, but actually to listen to other people's views, and more importantly, to understand and empathise with them. So that's an important aspect of oracy for me. The second quotation I'm giving you here is from the English Speaking Union. This was established it's over 100 years now, 1918, and they are an international charity that promote public speaking and debating foremost, but are now also extending into wider oracy outreach. And they say that oracy is to speaking what numeracy is to mathematics, or literacy to reading and writing. In short, it's nothing more than being able to express yourself well. It's about having the vocabulary to say what you want to say and the ability to structure your thoughts so that they make sense to others. So clarity is their kind of drive with oracy, that you're able to be articulate, that you can be very clear and confident when you want to deliver your ideas. Another way to think about oracy is that it's an overlap of learning to talk and learning through talk. This is an image from this excellent book, highly recommended, and the link will be in the slides when you get them at the end. And this book by Amy Gaunt and Alice Stott, who both taught at School 21 and are now leaders of Voice 21, emphasises that oracy is the crossover where you learn the explicit tools of talk, how to talk effectively with others and by yourself. And therefore, by doing so, you are learning through that talk, by listening to other people, by collaborating and problem solving. So it's a very simple diagram, but I think it does effectively sum up the crossover of skills, both learning to talk and through talk. Normally in a CPD session, I would now ask you to spend 3 minutes on post-it notes or on a big flip chart, writing down as many examples of classroom talk or what you think oracy looks like in your classroom. But ta-da, it's here on the slide for you because we can't be interactive. So the red speech bubbles are, I would term them speech acts. They are the more formal frameworks. So a discussion, a conversation, show and tell, pair share. These are actual talk events, I suppose you could call them. The blue speech bubbles are the content of talk. So if I were listening into a discussion amongst my year 12s, I would hopefully hear them explain, question, reflect, elaborate, clarify, justify maybe. So the blue terms are almost are the skills, I suppose, that you want your students to develop whilst they are doing the tasks in red. So why is it important? I'm going to look at 3 arguments or angles, I suppose. One predominant one is that we are equipping students for their as yet unknown future, that the little children entering in FS1 are on a journey that will hopefully eventually take them out the other end of year 13, either to university for further study or straight into a world of work. And to equip them for the future, this unknown future, soft skills are currently being seen as necessary. And whilst technology will keep advancing, we need to focus on the things we can develop and support right now. And at the World Economic Forum's annual meeting in Davos in January, their managing director, Sadia Zahidi, made the following statement. There's a common misconception that we'll all need to develop highly technological or scientific skills to succeed. Yet while it might be it will be necessary for people to work with technology, we're also seeing a growing need for people to develop specialized skills for how they interact with each other. These include creativity, collaboration, and interpersonal dynamics, as well as skills related to specialized sales, human resources, care, and education roles. So that need to interact is seen as a future skill. The World Economic Forum publish regular future of jobs reports. I've given you a snippet from the 2016 one on the left that predicted the 2020 top 10 skills needed for the world of work, and the 2018 report with the 2022 skills. Quick look at both of these and you will hopefully note that complex problem solving, critical thinking, coordinating with others are on both lists, and that ability to be able to talk and collaborate is key. The need to focus on collaborative problem solving was identified by some researchers at the University of Memphis. Grosser and some other researchers there were looking at collaborative problem solving and how it was being used and developed in education. The 2015 PISA report had identified low levels of proficiency. Now, the reason they feel that CPS, collaborative problem solving, needs to be focused on is highlighted in red. Much of the complex world in the modern world is performed by teams, whether that's face-to-face or online. Collaborative problem solving is an essential skill in the workforce and community. And it's that bridge that I think is important. The World Economic Forum are obviously looking ahead to workforce, but this is the bridge. It's not just about equipping students for the world of work. It's equipping them to be good members of a community, to be able to work with other people. And a third piece of evidence for this first argument is from the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development. There isn't time to go through this very extensive list, but the bright red words are the key skills that I believe oracy really helps to develop in our students. And the other ticked blue words are also elements that oracy supports, but those red words I think are important. And one of the key ones on there for me is empathy, followed by identity. So I think oracy is important for another reason, and that's because talk underpins reading and writing. So the second strand of why it's important is that actually talk has an academic benefit. If you know what you want to say, your writing will be stronger. And younger students, certainly in primary schools, are often more efficient and better at talking than they are reading and writing. Yet as they move into secondary school, they start to hide behind their reading and writing, and the talk starts to fade away and their voices are lost. So it's more of a secondary problem perhaps, but I think the point being made here by James Britton is that actually talk is critical. It is the main way we communicate as human beings, and therefore it needs to be viewed as important as reading and writing, if not actually the basis upon which they float. The academic benefits and cognitive benefits of oracy are explored in a lot of detail by a number of research projects. Again, not time now to go into them. Links will be in the slides at the end. But Professors Neil Mercer, Robin Alexander, and Rupert Wegerif at Cambridge have all taken out research projects, whether they're interventional or observational, looking at the impact of dialogic classrooms, of thinking together. That's Neil Mercer's programme, where students talk through problems in maths and science, and were then found after only 12 lessons to have increased cognitive ability when it came to problem solving, both independently and collaboratively. Robin Alexander's work with the Cambridge Primary Review Trust found that Year 5 students had made more than 2 months' progress in maths and English as a result of an intervention that focused on dialogue. So the research does support the power of oracy to actually have a cognitive benefit. And the third strand, which I already touched upon at the end of the first bit about community, is that I feel oracy is the way we are going to make our students better human beings, finding their own voices. This lovely cartoon by Grant Snyder, his book Shape of Ideas is beautiful, and I've put it at the end of the slides, just really sums up the idea that it's about being passionate and speaking with moderation and speaking your mind, and that final one, and then listen. That actually we need to equip our students with a confidence that they can articulate how they feel and what they want to say, but at the same time that they can be receptive to other views and listen with empathy. So for me, it's almost this third strand is the one I emphasize in my classroom, that it's a good thing to find your own voice, but also to listen and be heard as well. Okay, so how do we develop oracy if it's so important? Firstly, it's about establishing a classroom culture that promotes exploratory talk. It needs to become a mindset that you are going to make talk at the core of your classroom. If you do believe it is the sea upon which reading and writing float, or the skill that they need to become better human beings, then you need to promote it. And this can start with looking at benchmarks that you set yourself, or perhaps you work with the wider school and have school benchmarks as well. So Voice 21 have produced these benchmarks, worth a read later. And they just run through expectations, valuing it, how to teach it explicitly, to really embed it into your practice. So once you've kind of focused upon your development of the classroom, it's then about thinking about how you structure tasks. And I think for me, the big shift in my own teaching practice was when I realised that I needed to put as much time and thought into planning talk tasks in my classroom as much as I do with the reading and writing. And for a long time, I put a lot of time and effort into scaffolding and structuring writing, but perhaps not so much the oracy. I would just, in my notes, put group discussion for 5 minutes without any real thought about stems and what the purpose was and their angle, and actually giving them a structure and the language to use. So do think about planning carefully. Oracy Cambridge and Voice 21 have developed Neil Mercer's original oracy skills framework into this very colourful and simple overview that has the 4 key strands of physical, linguistic, cognitive and social and emotional elements. Within each one, you've got some ideas, and if you go to the Oracy Cambridge website, you can download this framework and glossary, which then goes through each aspect in a lot more detail. So I highly recommend you do that. And then use the framework to either plan your tasks so that they cover all of the different strands over the course of a year, or you can use it as an audit, or the students can even audit their own skills if they're a bit older using this framework. You also should co-construct guidelines for talk so that everybody is on the same page, so to speak, when you are using talk in your classroom. The middle one is the Voice 21 example, and that's for a primary school. The one on the right, the green dialogic do's and don'ts, was created by one of my Key Stage 3 classes at the beginning of last year. They worked in pairs initially, brainstorming a few ideas, then into small groups, and then as a class we fed back the best ideas onto the board, and we co-constructed these guidelines. These are on the wall, nice and large, and the important thing is when you establish guidelines that you refer back to them, review them regularly, assess how you're getting on as a group, and let them self-assess which elements are they doing well and which elements do they need to work on. Are they really being open-minded? Are they ignoring people in the group? Are some people not being brought into the conversation? So it's a really good reflection tool once they've co-constructed that with you. It's also important that you make active listening a focus. Talk is very important. Oracy is a really big umbrella. It's about talking in the classroom, but it's also about listening. And that's an important focus as well, teaching students to listen. And I know this is done really well at primary. My boys, when they were little, used to talk about their big listening ears. And it's just a reminder, certainly as they get older, about body language as well, that active listening means you are engaging with the speaker. And again, here the 4 strands have been broken down into some ideas for showing what it looks like. And I would model it as well with a class, identifying, certainly when they're younger, examples of good listening. It's also important to model good questioning, demonstrate exploratory language yourself, and extend wait time. So asking questions in a lesson and then pausing a bit longer for the answer. We're so guilty as teachers of closing down questions. You ask the question before students have had a chance to answer it. Maybe you've already changed it or modified it. Or when they do start answering, you're kind of listening for what you want to hear. And we often cut them off a bit too quickly with our, yes, great idea, feedback. If we wait a bit longer, and research has shown more than 3 seconds, students are likely to then enter a second speech cycle and add a bit more to their answer. And that's what you're looking for, that exploratory language as they go a bit further. And you can help them do this with stems, providing them cards with prompts or mats, depending on the task that they're doing, that have some ideas there of the words, the questions, the language to use. I've used with my Harkness classes, so a bit older, and I'll talk about Harkness lessons later on, these laminated cards, as you can see the picture on your screen. And on the back are prompts, so that when they're having a Harkness discussion, the 4 aspects that I want them to focus on are question, challenge, develop, and connect. And they've got the prompts on the back if they're a little unsure as to how to use that language. And it doesn't take the older students long. They then make games out of it. How many of these can they play in a lesson? And if all they ever do is challenge or question people, then I give them the slightly more collaborative develop and connect cards. So it can be quite fun, and you can do that at any age, but just giving them the scaffold, which obviously you can then gradually withdraw. Once you've got talk up and running in the classroom and it's been modelled and demonstrated, trying to incorporate it significantly once a week in secondary, where you might only see a class 2 or 3 times, or once a day if you have your class for an extended time as a primary teacher. Just really trying to get it embedded, that it becomes normal for them to be talking for an extended amount of time with focus. And then reflect upon this and talk about talk with your classes, really instill that culture of oracy. Talk Detectives is a fun thing that Voice 21 talk about on their website. And essentially it's peer assessment. It's giving maybe a clipboard and a magnifying glass at primary level. I'm not sure my year 12s would appreciate it if I did that. But really sort of getting them to be the listeners that lesson, going around, listening to what's going on, writing down good examples of talk. So really being detectives and hunting out the excellent oracy in a classroom. Also, another way, certainly if they're struggling or unsure of how to map their own discussions and actually run their own discussions as a small group, is giving them roles. And there's some lovely cards here. This is an example from Voice 21. I've used a lot of their material today because I just really like its clarity and its colour. But there are so many online of ideas and cue cards and role cards. So that actually, if you find that, for example, some students start to dominate the talk, they get given the summariser role, and they have to therefore sit and listen to everybody else. Or if they're not talking much, maybe you make them the clarifier. So it's just rotating the roles within a group so that actually equity starts to be realised, that the louder students start to modify their domination, and the less dominant students start to feel that they have the confidence to contribute. I also recommend rotating groups, and I'll talk about that when I give you the example of group work later. Okay, so on to examples. Time is pressing on. I'm watching the clock tick down. So solo talk. I just wanted to finish now with examples of solo, group and class talk, whole class talk, based on my own practice. So these are experiential, but you will find echoes and examples of them both in the Amy Gaunt and Alice Stock book, and also this excellent book by Rupert Knight, which brings together all of the research and evidence of classroom talk. He covers Neil Mercer, he covers Voice 21. It's a superb, really nice, small, slim, evidence-based teaching. That's fantastic. So Solo talk, as with all talk events and acts in the classroom, I feel there isn't enough modelling. Very often students are told to just put together a PowerPoint presentation, deliver it next lesson, and yet they haven't necessarily been shown what a good PowerPoint looks like, what a good presentation looks like, what does a good speech look like, a good debate. Show them clips, videos, really model, and then as a class deconstruct the elements that made it effective so that they can then plan and perform. We do this with writing, but so often we don't do it with oracy. So that's the first premise. Online and blended, I used the voice recorder a lot last term. All students had one either on their phone or their Surface Pro or laptop. So it's very easy for them to record themselves and then to upload it to a secure platform. My own boys were doing it with Seesaw, and we use Microsoft Teams at Dubai College. So it was a very simple way, and actually doing solo talk online or blended is very straightforward. So a quick example, just running through what we did, was radio advertisements. We were doing an advertising unit with Year 7, and they had listened to a bank of radio advertisements for homework that I had put into our team. Then in groups the next lesson, using channels, and I'll talk about that in a moment, they deconstructed the advertisements to find out the key elements of them. We then had a whole class discussion on the call, summarising with spokespeople, hands up function and the chat bar to add extra ideas if they were missed. And then the students went away for the following lesson, which was offline, and it wasn't a live call, and they planned their own advertisement, recorded and uploaded it, and they had homework to do that as well. Following week, the students then listened to a selection of anonymised all of the recordings, shuffled them up, gave different ones to each group, and they listened to them and played bingo to actually analyse the language being used and had they met the criteria, nominated their favourite one, and as a class we listened to the 5 nominations and then voted for the best one. So it was a really good solo and group task. The instructions, as you can see here, were as detailed as a written task. The actual task is on the left with the criteria, very clear content, structure, the detail I wanted, the instructions at the bottom, and then very explicit instructions for recording and uploading. And I thought I'd just play you, I think I've got time, a quick example.
Did the Easter Bunny skip your visit this year?
Yeah.
Have you been avoiding unhealthy snacks and treats while in quarantine? And has your family been itching to get out?
Oh, yeah.
Well, no more. Merzam chocolate is just too good to resist.
No, I shouldn't.
Or should you? Vegan, dark, milky, creamy, you name it, Merzam claims it.
Wow.
Go now to Al Circle Avenue, Dubai, open 7 days a week, 10 a.m. to 10 p.m, and see for yourself at the Merzam factory. It's just too darn delicious.
Okay, very cute. And she won her class vote. And as you can see here, within the team's chat, they had clear instructions that they were to head off to their bingo channel. And by this point in home learning, my class were very adept at just heading off to the channel, organising themselves. And I was rotating round, listening to them.
Did the Easter Bunny skip your visit this year?
It's talking again. And then they voted to exit at the end using forms. Another example of solo talk, which I will just fly through very quickly, but just shows another way of using talk, certainly in a distance manner. But it would, all of these examples actually, I just want to point out, would work in the classroom face to face. I just adapted them for online last term. This was actually verbal analysis rather than writing their Shakespeare assessment. I did give an option for Year 8 to actually record an oral analysis instead, answering the 3 questions. So rather than writing paragraphs, they had the option to talk. A couple did, not many, and those that did used the voice recorder, they uploaded the file to Teams, and those who chose it answered the questions in greater detail than they would have done if writing. I was blown away, actually, by the students who recorded their answers. There isn't time to listen to examples, but they were just brilliant. There was so much exploratory language and plenty of textual evidence. So it's a really good way to mix it up so that actually, as I said right at the beginning, if you practice out loud and talk it through, you will often elaborate and develop and really explore your answer, either to record it and submit that or then to commit it to paper. But for me, this was a very effective solo task. Okay, group work. basically, wherever the group work is taking place, whether it's in the classroom or online, it needs to be scaffolded initially, either with the prompt cards, the stems, or with role cards, but give it a structure so that students don't get distracted and it just becomes chatting for 10 minutes. Group sizes I would build on. I recommend starting with pairs, ideally threes, because actually in a pair it can break down and then there's nothing going on. In a three, even if one person decides to opt out slightly, two can keep it going. So 3 is a very good number. Here are some examples of different groupings you can experiment with. And if you are doing 3s, what I also like to do, and here's a nice visual again from Voice 21, is to actually have one person listening and they summarize, they're the silent listener and they summarize back what they've heard. And it just teaches that listening skill, and that can be rotated. Online, for group work, I used channels or breakout rooms. It depends what platform you're using. We're obviously using Teams. And for blended, next term, I plan to have students who are online being in channels with students who are in the classroom, so that I am integrating the online students with the in-school students, so that those groups still have a very connected dynamic. And how does that look? In action, here's a screenshot from my team. As you can see, channels on the left-hand side. This is year 8, and they had teams of 4 in 5 separate channels, clear instructions here on the right in each channel. We recorded all of our calls for safeguarding purposes, but the added benefit was those lessons could then be reviewed, because the call was recorded straight up into our private stream. So students could access lessons if they missed them or if they wanted to review them. And the year 12 students really found that beneficial. They can go back and revise key poems by re-listening to our lesson. This was supported with OneNote, and written evidence of the discussion, the annotation, as you can see a quick picture there, was going on in OneNote, and I was hopping between the different calls. So I could just join and leave any of these channels while they were having live calls. I could see they were being recorded by the red dots. I could see who was in them with the little icons, and I could literally just enter and leave. And what I would do 1 week is take it in turns over lessons, listening to different groups, and then the groups would shuffle so that each group did get heard by me each week. Whole class talk really does need structure and clear guidelines, back to those guidelines earlier on of co-constructing them. Be conscious of teacher-led talk. It's very easy when you've got a full class to take control and do all the talking, and sometimes that's necessary, and I think that is important to say, that instructional talk is needed, and quick IRF cycles of ask a question, yes, no answers, quick feedback for retrieval practice, that's fine as well. But just do be aware of, sometimes we dominate. We dominate about 75% actually, research has shown. So we talk a lot, and do we need to? Embrace silences, they're thinking time. And it's really getting students comfortable with silence, and they're not, and we're not. So that takes work. Equity of discussion should be monitored, whether you're mapping in a Harkness style that I'm about to show you, or whether you're just recording on a tick sheet participation over a week, just to make sure everyone's had a go, especially if you're online and where people can disappear behind the screens. I have a no hands up policy in my Key Stage 3 classrooms. If I want hands up, I actually say, put your hand up. Otherwise, I keep hands down. And cold calling, some people don't like it, and you do have to know your students. I read a room, but it also means I can just make sure over the course of a week, I have questioned nearly every child by not having a hands up, because the same keen beans put their hands up and others sometimes stop thinking of their answer because they see that a hand's already gone up. So I have a hands down. I'll select. Sometimes I will bounce so that I get an answer and I bounce it on and ask somebody else to add to it. And the students are always free to pass if they don't know. And initially that's a bit awkward, but they certainly get much more comfortable with saying pass and passing it on. Okay, so online, I think the best ways to have whole class discussions, I'm doing it with 20 students with Key Stage 3, is to use the chat box in whichever platform you're using. I like Padlet as well for gathering ideas before and or after during discussions. Multi-view platforms, we use Teams and Cisco WebEx, and we have a cameras on policy. So I will have a grid of all the students. Obviously, if I'm sharing a PowerPoint like now, I can't see them, which is when the cold calling and the questioning and making sure you are hearing from everybody is important. Hands up really works for that, to enable participation. And I do track who has or hasn't spoken over a series of lessons. If it's blended, I suggest you do involve distant learners by inviting answers to questions that are posed in the classroom. You can invite responses from online. And I plan to have certainly my screen open on the whiteboard so I can see the chat function and I can see things being added. Again, online learners can summarise, and I will be using devices in the classroom to link to students who are out of it. Right, time is flying. So very quickly, a final example. I haven't got time to fully explain Heartness. That is a completely different CPD session. But the very simple premise of Heartness is it's moving the traditional rows of desks or teacher-centred transition model. You can see all the talks going up to that teacher, to being a more equitable discussion around the table where the teacher is simply a participant. The Heartness table we have at DC is down bottom left, but in our teaching and learning centre, we use these other configurations to create smaller Heartness tables in other classes. If you have a really large class, you can also do fishbowl. So you sit the participants in the middle and everyone sits around the outside. And the key thing about Heartness lessons is they are student-led. So initially, yes, I scaffold and I develop, and sometimes I have instructional lessons, but by and large, they run the discussion and they have pre-prepared. So my sixth form have these packs that I've created that are full of articles and think pieces, and they have to prep specific ones before lessons. They're also prepping their texts, Othello, poetry, and they come and they've got a question that they're discussing that lesson, or they're discussing a scene, or they're analysing a poem. And they also have guidelines. So here are the guidelines for Heartness that are just a bit more of a mature development of the classroom guidelines for lower down the school. The teacher's role in all of this, in all oracy, but certainly in whole class oracy and Heartness, which is almost the pinnacle of stepping back and letting the students talk, is that you model effective talk, you scaffold talk, you plan the tasks, you're preparing these discussion-rich materials, you facilitate, you praise, support, encourage, you listen, you encourage silence, you talk about talk, you build up the length that they're talking, and then you talk about talk in the staff room and with colleagues. The reason I've put this slide in is because by the time I get to talk about Heartness, which isn't much today, it wasn't the focus of today's talk, is that the feedback often is, oh, well, what does the teacher do? Are you just having a cup of coffee while they're all running their own lesson? No, you've done all of this. You've got them to that point. And actually it's the pre-preparation that is key in Heartness as a teacher. Very quickly, this is just how Heartness looks. So my normal lessons, so this is my year 12s in, I think, about January in our Heartness room studying Othello, and then Heartness Online takes a very different form, and it's a grid, as you can see there. The pace slows down, non-verbal cues are hard to read, they miss eye contact, and it does break down a bit, there are overlaps, but they get there. And I certainly found that my class, when they've been mapped in a classroom, and again, this is another talk, but I use equity maps and I track the discussion, as you can see there on the iPad, and they get data out the back end of it with equity factors. But when we went online, the map, actually, this was a lesson, a Heartness lesson online, and as you can see, it's still flowing. That's all student-led. I am not a participant in either of these lessons. I'm observing from the outside. I didn't say anything for either of them. And in fact, the one top left, they had as an online lesson without me. That was completely student-led. They logged on, recorded the call. I went on afterwards and mapped it as in, watching the video back, and I made notes on comments around the edge, and that's how I map a sixth form lesson. And it worked really well, but we had 2 terms of building up to that. Okay, time is up. I've overrun by 2 minutes, I'm sorry. But the key things, I think this is a lovely little illustration here from Impact Wales. Again, I love their diagrams and visuals, do follow them on Twitter, is that actually to improve oracy, you just have to focus on it. You have to plan for it. You have to encourage it, talk about it, and really empower your students that actually they have things to say and they're valuable ideas and they're worth hearing, and more to the point, that we do listen to them. So I hope it's been helpful today. It's felt very quick and rapid, and I've packed in what would normally be probably a full day into sort of just some snippets of ideas. But I would like to talk more about this with any of you who would like to talk about it. So a very last 1 minute plug. We're launching the Odyssey Hub this term. Hopefully it'll probably be online, obviously for the first time, but then we hope to meet in person later on. But we'd like some speakers. So if you would like to talk for 10 minutes about an oracy idea or oracy in your classroom, or some great examples of what your classes do, any age, it'd be great to have a range of primary and secondary, then please do get in touch. Do follow us on Twitter. Harkness, I would love to talk more about Harkness with people. We were meant to have a demonstration last term and it got cancelled, so it's postponed until next spring, and there will be CPD courses running for me to kind of train people in Harkness, so watch the space. And finally, I'd just love to connect and collaborate, so please do get in touch. I'm already working with some primary schools here in Dubai, going in and sort of working with them and collaborating and them coming up and observing. So we're very open. I'm certainly very open as well to sharing ideas, coming to watch, getting feedback, and collaborating. So please do get in touch. Any questions, use the app, and there'll be lots of links on the slides when you receive them. Thank you for listening, and I hope it was helpful.